Hi, I'm Joe Kramer, host of the Ruck On Show. I believe that life, much like rucking, is a journey. On this show, we examine various aspects on this ruck march of life. From overcoming obstacles to dealing with setbacks, there's a takeaway for you on your journey. The Ruck On Show is sponsored by the Ruck On 30-Day Challenge. Grab your copy of this rucking workout challenge at ruckon.com. That's ruck-on.com. Let's get started with today's show. All right, welcome back to episode 2 of the Ruck On Show. Tonight I have another guest, Matt Malcom. He and I are West Point classmates, class of 2016. Matt ended up commissioning just like I did as an Army officer, but he ended up leaving the military shortly thereafter for, I guess, not so typical reasons. But we've stayed in close contact. He's just published a book, and I'm really excited to have you on the show, Matt, if you want to say a couple words.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really thrilled to be here. I love the concept of what you're doing. The inside of my head that got me to where I am today, that internal conversation happened on many ruck marches. So I'm excited to try to weave some connections together between my story and all the time that I spent walking under a heavy load.
Awesome. All right. Well, so the way I kind of see rucking and life kind of like matching up is kind of twofold. So one being just, our entire life is essentially a ruck march. We're born, we die at some point, and our ruck's kind of the journey that we take throughout the course of our life. And then the second component I see is throughout your life, I feel like each one of us has kind of like little mini journeys, little mini objectives that we go through, whether it be, graduating high school, graduating college, anything and everything that we kind of set as like a goal that we want to accomplish, that being kind of like a mini ruck. And so that's kind of how I see it. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. And we'll kind of jump into your stories as well.
Yeah, I think so. I was a philosophy major, one of the few.
Nice.
There weren't many of us, and I think my biggest regret was that I was so inundated with other things and with like institutionalized thinking coming from other places that I was able to capture a lot of information and a lot of good information, but I never absorbed it. And so it left me at a place where I was getting all this great new perspectives added to my worldview, but it wasn't until after I left West Point that I was able to synthesize it. And
yeah, they kind of throw a lot at you that you don't really have time to let it kind of filter through until you're totally out of there.
No, I literally went back and I read some of the papers that I wrote, and I was like, I knew that then. Like I realized these things then, and I just had no idea that I was already thinking about it. I just didn't even have time to be aware. And so when I think about rucking, especially at West Point and shortly thereafter, was that it was the time where I had to be honest with myself, because there's nothing else to do. In the days before social distancing, right, when we did it in whether it's like a platoon or a company, like that's what we were doing. You can't really talk to somebody if they're 6 to 12 feet away from you.
Yeah.
And for the most part, we didn't have music or anything, so you're just kind of walking. Mm-hmm. And there's not really much else to consider. And it was in those moments that I think I had maybe like the trickle or the drip, of some of what
clarity.
Would become a much, yeah. And that's where a lot of what would become a much bigger existential crisis, I think, would emerge from. I remember at one point it was so bad that I actually had flashcards with random things to memorize while we were rucking, and I would pull them out just so that I could have something to occupy my mind with. And I think that there's an element of somewhere deep in me, I was like, I don't want to think about all of the things that I'm really feeling, because there's no time, you know, we're on a track, and I just wasn't ready, to be honest with myself. And I remember that I had a bit of a culminating moment, and I guess this is perfect for the show. When I was at Bullock, right before I decided to make the transition, which is, I don't know how much you want to get into that, or what that would look like, but that Ruck March, it was just a 12 miler, and at the end of that, I was like, I'm done. Like, I've made my decision. And so for me, it really became a space. My personality always is that I'm always thinking, I'm always trying, always building.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really hard to get my mind to a quiet, steady place. And so 12 miles of isolation and silence, though, will do that to you. And
A lot of time to think. Yeah.
completely. And so they kind of became these laboratories for being contemplative and thoughtful. And yeah, and so I don't know if I thought about it until now, but it was really that Ruck March at Bullock was the kind of the final straw on the camel's back that led me to making some of the decisions that I did.
That's really interesting. That is really interesting. And I guess I kind of know bits and pieces of, your story of getting out of the military. And, in my head, that was like, oh, wow, that'd be a great kind of tying like life to rucking, kind of your journey through that. But it's your story. So, I mean, if that's the
Yeah,
one that you want to share, by all
sure.
means. If you can think of something that rather share, like whatever you want to go with.
Yeah, no, I think I remember particularly just a lot of the different physical events we did, and Rucking was no exception at West Point, that it was really hard for me to accept the reality that I could be on a different path than everybody else, because it's such a standardized place. Everyone runs a 2 mile on the same track. Everyone does sit-ups in the same place. Everyone goes through the same classes. Everyone has to meet the same metrics at Beast. We're training on the same grounds that everybody's always trained on. That whole idea, and it was in a lot of these physical events that I started playing with the idea that maybe I'm different, which is, one of the the expressions that was around that I had to compete with was, if you're the nail that sticks out of the floor, you're the one that's going to get hammered first. And so that was everywhere I turned, that kind of thinking. And so there was always this tension between just wanting to fly under the radar and succeed, and also feeling really existential and thoughtful and reflective. And so I think kind of towards the end of West Point, I finally, I think, accepted. It was like one of the last APFTs. Remember down there by the river and the sewage plant where we would do the
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember that.
And I finally accepted that that while this particular thing was a test, that life itself wasn't a race. The point wasn't to compete in isolation and in separation from other people. It wasn't to stand out and be the best. That there was actually this really uncomfortable interdependence that I had with the people around me, and I was wasting time essentially competing against them, and allowing my ego to be deflated when I lost, and then everything that came with that, and allowing myself to be inflated when I succeeded, and everything that came with that. There was something much more urgent going on beneath the surface. It's almost like competition and everything that came with that was preventing me from seeing it in my deeper self. But ultimately, there's a lot of different institutionalized ways of thinking that I'd grown up in. Grew up in a military family. I grew up in a certain type of religious setting. It was very fundamentalist. And so there were things that I couldn't question. And that's why I hated the times of isolation, the times of being alone. And towards the end of my time being a cadet and then becoming an officer, I finally decided to take seriously some of the doubts and some of the questions that I had about the worldview that I had constructed, or the one that I had been given. And I finally connected with the idea that, if I was being honest with myself, I am uncomfortable categorically, regardless of reason, with the concept of taking human life. And that particularly, I'm working through it. The idea of pacifism or something like that was always presented to me as an extremist view, something that couldn't actually withstand, that wasn't robust enough for the real world. The pacifists were sort of putting a sign on their front door, as it were, to come attack me.
Right.
I won't protect myself. And I've got 2 kids, and I know in a moment that if something, I think biology would take over, and if there was a threat to my kids, I don't know what I would do, and I hope that I would be sensible enough to try to keep my kids safe or something without hurting anybody. But I don't know. I don't know what biology would dictate in that moment. But I do know that categorically, like the premeditated concept of training and working for the sole outcome, whether it's through a support function or directly taking human life, especially, in a larger geopolitical context or something like that. For me, that was simply unfathomable. And that was the idea, I think, that arose when I was a freshman, a sophomore, but I hid from myself. And so I kind of was arrested, I think, in that thought development. And that's the whisper that would emerge and remind me when I was rucking or running or something like that. So being quiet became a very uncomfortable exercise for me. And I tried many things to be able to have peace and to have quietness without confronting that. But it was always there. And I think it was manifesting in really interesting ways. I would be anxious about this, or I'd be upset about that, or I'd be mad about that. In retrospect, I think I made a lot of really poor decisions, based on feeling traumatized and things like that in a moment from other people, from some of these religious institutions. But ultimately, there's kind of this arc of, I was feeling and realizing these things about myself, and I don't think that I can level a judgment on anybody else how they feel about it. It was enough of a project for me, to be honest with myself, that's enough, honestly, for a lifetime. But it emerged, and I kind of plateaued for a while, and I had a really rough couple of years, and finally, right after Bullock, there at the end, I said, no, life's not going to be okay for me if I don't make this decision, and I don't know what will come from it. And honestly, not all of the outcomes of this decision have been pleasant. There's been
don't doubt
quite
that.
been quite a bit of professional, financial, and personal cost that's come with it. And it's, even as a philosopher, I don't think that I could, write a 20-page essay or something about why this is objectively or categorically the right decision. It's much more visceral than that. And
I think
and
sometimes
today,
it just comes down to being able to look yourself in the mirror and feeling good about yourself and the path that you're on.
Completely. And even more than that, so I guess the end of last year, I ran a marathon for the first time.
Oh wow.
And all that to say is that I think it demonstrates the mental shift that had happened, where I was able, throughout the training and then through the marathon itself, I was able to have a clear, tranquil headspace, because I can be alone with myself.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, I don't know if that would mean anything to anyone watching or listening, but I think there's something really important to paying attention to your body when you're doing an exercise like rucking or running, where there's a lot of breathing, there's a lot of going into your body and taking assessment of how you're feeling. There's a lot of reflecting, there's a lot of quietness. And then exercise is tremendously helpful. And you might not always like what you find, but I think those brave enough among us who are capable of being honest with themselves are also the people that are going to be capable to lead society through sort of the inevitable shift that we're going to have to go through, in the coming years, to make sure that our children and our grandchildren have a world, and that it's not destroyed, by some of the things that we've been doing because we haven't taken the time to stop and reflect. And so, maybe even what we're experiencing right now with COVID-19 is, as awful as it is, an odd and strange opportunity to do some of that type of being alone and being honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
And asking ourselves, what kind of world do we want to leave for our kids, and for our grandkids?
No, that's really I mean, you obviously shed a very big light on how important and crucial reflection is. And I mean, I'm the same way. I enjoy my rucks because I can kind of, I guess, air out everything that's going on in my head. And, I try to focus it sometimes on things that I need to do and what have you, but it is a good opportunity to kind of poke at some of the bigger life ideas and concepts and stuff. But so I want to shift a tiny bit. So
Sure.
The other, I guess, analogy that I like to draw from rucking is, when we did it, say at, CLDT or, our summer training exercises, and, we're on a mission going from point A to point B, and we take a tactical pause, and whoever your squad leader or team leader was would kind of come running around, check in on everybody, kind of see how everyone's doing, at least the good ones would. And so what I kind of like to do for this episode is, you're the squad leader, you're the team leader in this instance, and, the people watching this podcast are, the guys in your squad, your team that you're going to check in on. What piece of advice or what kind of helped you kind of, as you said, there was a lot of costs to going through the process that you did to get out of the military. What, be it mindset, attitude, mentality, just, one or two pieces of kind of actionable, like somebody might be going through the same thing or be on the verge of realizing that they're kind of on the same path. What do you say? Hey, this is what helped me. Maybe it'll help you.
Yeah. So I'm a philosopher, so I'll try to say something as grounded as possible. It's hard sometimes because I think big, and it works for me. But so I'll give you an answer, and you tell me if it's sufficient. It's that's a great analogy for life, and I think a squad is a great analogy for life, simply because, especially at that level, at that echelon, there's such a sense of oneness and camaraderie, and there's not really a concept of strict hierarchy. There's not a huge separation of the squad leader, for example, is not light years or career wise removed from the people in the squad. There's a singularity. I think camaraderie is the best word for it. And when I started going through these types of changes, the fundamental difference, I want to call it a lie because I feel that strongly about it. Like, I saw it this way and I realized that wasn't true, but it could just be my perception. But the fundamental difference in the way that I used to see the world and I see it now is that when I do something out of compassion or out of care or out of empathy, I'm not necessarily helping someone else as much as I'm helping myself. And the reason to me that that's significant is that ability of humans in recent years, especially, to sort of atomize ourselves and individualize ourselves and separate ourselves from each other, and go into our houses and shut the doors and pull into our jobs and our niches. And the lack of dependence that we have on each other. I mean, again, a squad literally needs each other to survive. Some people stay awake while others sleep. Some people eat while others watch. That it's uncomfortable how dependent you are on an echelon that size. And so, yeah, I think the thing that sort of got me over the hump of, I'm ideating about some of these realizations about myself. I'm thinking about them. I'm thinking about making a decision. But ultimately, um, the picture in my head changed about what the realities of being a soldier or being an officer would mean. And so instead of it being about my individual performance as a lieutenant on the firing line or on a firing mission or something like that, it suddenly became about the other person who'd be the recipient of my job. You know, wherever that round is landing, who is that person? Do they have kids like me? Um, do they have the same fears that I do? Um, are they worried about the same things that I'm worried about? Do they get excited about the same things that are different things? But in some respect, I'm deeply connected to this person. And I've got to be more connected to this person than simply having the capacity to end their life indiscriminately from miles away. And closing that gap of separation, uh, I think that was my willingness to accept that I'm uncomfortably dependent on these people that I'm training to kill, in a way that I still have yet to fully realize. And in a shared humanity sense, in a shared ability to be alive and to be aware and to love and to have pain, you know, and to hurt and to heal. I share those things with whoever I'm fighting, regardless of the circumstance. And I felt like throughout growing up in a military house, just, you know, being around the narrative and the story of the military, and then being at West Point, there was a narrative of separation that allowed everything to exist. You know, the reason that we're able to do this at mass, at the scale that we're able to do, is the only way psychologically that a human can do that is to separate and remove or dehumanize other people.
Make the person the other.
Exactly. And something happens when you realize that's a lie, and you realize there is no other. And in many respects, the things I dislike in my enemy are also present in me and my country and my unit, in my family, you know, and as I said, I mean, in myself. And so suddenly the confidence with which a human needs to take another human's life is diminished if you recognize that capacity for connectedness and likeness, and seeing your image in another human. And you have to be very confident and ready to take their life, or filled with lots of hate and rage, and that could be justifiable, but that wasn't me. And so, yeah, I think to sort of bring it back down to a ground level, that was a really big idea. But you know, what can someone do if they're having moments of contemplative reflection and they're realizing that they're not on the path that they want to be on? Regardless of what the issue is, I think taking a moment, finding your breath, finding a connection and a love for yourself, and a love and a connection with yourself that is transferable to other people. There's something about that process of oneness and wanting. You can actually make it a verb. I've heard people do it. That whatever you're looking for, I think, is somewhere in there. Maybe not universally true, but I think it's pretty darn close.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. I appreciate kind of bringing it down, like you said, but no, I think that's good. It's kind of maybe realizing that whatever you're going through, maybe kind of not making it about you, kind of bringing in how it's connected to everyone else in a way.
Yeah. And what's crazy about that is, it's been my experience that as you accept your dependence on other people, other things, you actually find more of a confidence about who you are as an individual. So it's this sort of paradox.
Yeah.
That you lose yourself when you isolate yourself, and you find yourself when you thrust yourself into relationship and into that uncomfortable need and identification with other people. Yeah, it's a strange paradox. but I guess a lot of life is. So maybe it,
Yeah.
maybe it adds up.
Wouldn't be the only one, that's for sure.
Definitely not.
Well, I would say that anybody who's watching this, if they're interested in kind of digging deeper into Matt's story and kind of his journey through processing all of this, should definitely go read his book. And I will let Matt share where to find his book, how to follow him, and we'll be sure to have links to all those with the podcast.
Right on, man. No, thank you for that. That's super cool. Yeah, my blog it's repairinghope.com. Spelled just like it sounds, one word. There's lots of different types of content on there right now. Lots of just blog posts. I'm in post-production for the first season of the podcast. I'm really looking forward to that. The theme is transformation. As you can tell, that seems to be sort of my thing. What happens when you think about your life or what you want? So I'm talking to people from all stripes of life who had a realization and made some sort of profound shift, and how you can too. And then and I just dropped an ebook. It's called How to Find Love After Church. The theme of that is how to make sense of the world spiritually, if your transformation has included moving beyond a dogmatic or principled religious worldview, how you can still find so many of the essential elements of what it is to be human in other forms and in other places, and maybe just by other names. That's kind of my main theme, if anyone's interested in any of that. And then you can follow me on Instagram. That's probably the best place for social media at MG Malcom. That's my handle, MGMALCOM. There's no second L. I know it's weird, but that's just the way I was born. So, but would love to hear from anybody. Feel free to DM me. And in all those places, there's tons of ways to get in contact with me. And if you go to Repairing Hope right now and subscribe to our mailing list, you can also get the ebook for free. I'll send it your way for free. So please feel free to do any of that. It's like $3.99 on Amazon. So if COVID's got you tight and you're trying to save some money and you're looking for a way to kill an hour reading an ebook, might be a good solution.
It's definitely worth the read. So I highly
man.
encourage anyone to subscribe if they want to get it for free, or buy it, help Matt out, and follow him. He's just a good dude to know. So.
Oh man, I appreciate that. And same goes back to you as well. We're going to have you on the Repairing Hope podcast in season 2, I think.
Looking forward to it.
Right on, man. Super
well,
cool.
Thanks for your time, Matt. Thanks for coming on tonight. Been a great guest.
Absolutely, man. My pleasure. You've been a great host. Can't wait to do this again soon.
Yep. Have a good night. Bye.
All right, you too, man. Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Ruck On Show. Be sure to follow us on social media and reach out to let us know what you thought of today's episode. If you feel so inclined, please leave a 5-star rating and a review on iTunes. See you next time, and thanks for listening.